Hi, welcome to this Corbettmaths video. In this video, we're going to look at the video solutions to the practice questions on reverse percentages. If you need any extra help on reverse percentages, if you go to Corbettmaths and scroll down to the videos and worksheets section, and scroll down to video number 240. Video number 240 is a video tutorial there on reverse percentages. Alternatively, you could scan this QR code. But in this video, we're going to focus on the video solutions to the practice questions, so let's get started. Okay, so let's have a look at our first question, question number 1. So question number 1 says, Patrick invested money into a special savers bank account, and each year the money in the account earns 4% interest. And after 1 year, the total amount of money in the account was £291.20. And the question says, how much money did Patrick invest? So there's a few different approaches we could use to do this question. One approach is to consider, well, if we started off with how much money he had in the bank to begin with, so let's let that be 100%. And if it increased by 4%, then he would have 104%. So that's how much money would be in the bank, 104% of what he started with. So because it went up by 4%. And that is equal to £291.20. So that's £291.20. Now we want to find out how much money Patrick had in the bank to begin with, the 100%. So let's find 1%. So to get from 104% to 1%, we would divide by 104. We would divide by 104. And also we would divide this by 104. So we're going to divide both of these by 104. So 1% would be, if we do on our calculator, 291.2 or 20 divided by 104. That's equal to 2.8 or £2.80. So that means that 1% is equal to 2.8 or £2.80. Now we want to find out 100% what he started with. So let's times by 100. Let's multiply by 100 and let's multiply by 100. And then if we take our 1% and times by 100, that would be 100%, the total amount that he started with. And that'd be equal to 2.8 times 100 would be equal to £280. So that means that Patrick started with £280. And that's it. So how much money did Patrick invest? The answer is £280. And that's it. So that was one approach. Another approach is to consider multipliers, because Patrick put some money in the bank. So let's just say this is the amount of money that he put in the bank. And then it increased by 4%. So in terms of multipliers, and feel free to watch the video on Corbettmaths on multipliers, if you want to increase something by 4%, you multiply by 1.04, because if something goes up by 4%, you would have 104%. And as a decimal number, or as a multiplier, that's 1.04. So if you multiply by 1.04, it will increase it by 4%. And we know the answer is equal to £291.20. So if we want to go backwards and find out what the original amount was, we could just take how much money he has in the bank after the year, the £291.20, and we could just divide by the multiplier. So divide by 1.04, and if you divide by the multiplier, it'll bring you back to what he started with. So if we do 291.2 or 20 divided by 1.04, that's also equal to £280. So that means he started with £280. And you can check your answer. If you do 280 multiplied by 1.04, you'll get £291.20. So if you divide by the multiplier that you would have used, then that brings you back to the original amount. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 2. So question number 2, I'm just going to change back to red. So in terms of our question number 2, we're told the population of Sandcliffe has decreased by 2% over the past year. And the population of Sandcliffe this year is now 52,920. And the question says calculate the population of Sandcliffe last year. So we want to go back and find the original amount. So we're doing a reverse percentages question. We're finding the original amount. So over the last year, it's decreased by 2%. So that means that we're now left with 98%. So we've got the 98% is what the population is now, and that's equal to 52,920. So because it went down by 2%, we're left with 98%, and that's equal to 52,920. Now, that's what 98% is. We want to find 100%, what the original amount was, so we want to find what 1% is to begin with. So to get from 98% to 1%, we divide by 98, so we divide by 98. That means we also want to divide this by 98, so we divide by 98 as well. And if we do on our calculator, 52,920 divided by 98, that's equal to 540. So it means that 1% is 540. Now we want to find out what 100% is. That's what the original population of Sandcliffe was at the beginning of the year. And then if we multiply by 100, we'll find 100%. So if we multiply this by 100, we'll get 100%. We'll find out what the population was. So 540 times 100 would be 54,000. That means the population was 54,000. And that's it. That's the population last year. So that's one approach. Another approach is to consider multipliers. The fact that here we had the population of Sandcliffe and it was decreased by 2%. So to decrease something by 2%, we would multiply by 0.98. So that would be our multiplier, 0.98. So if you multiply something by 0.98, because if you had 100%, if you decrease it by 2%, you're left with 98%. And as a decimal, that's 0.98. So that means that the multiplier that would have been used to decrease it by 2% would be 0.98. Now, if we want to go backwards, we're going to take what the population is now, the 52,920, and we're going to divide that by what multiplier would have been used, which is 0.98. And if we do 52,920 divided by 0.98, that's equal to 54,000. So the population of Sandcliffe last year would have been 54,000, and that's it. And you can check your answer. If you take the 54,000 and multiply by 0.98, you'll get that's equal to 52,920, and that's it. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 3. So question number 3 says a box contains red and yellow marbles. So there's just red and yellow marbles in the box, and 40% of the marbles in the box are yellow. So 40% of the marbles are yellow, so that means the rest, 60%, must be red. And there's 80 yellow marbles in the box, and the question says work out the total number of marbles in the box. Now this question is a bit different than question 1 and question 2, because in question 1, if we have a look at it, the amount of money in the bank went up by 4%, and in question number 2, the population went down by 2%. But in this question, nothing's going up or down. We're actually just being told what 40% of the marbles are. 40% of the marbles are yellow, and there's 80 yellow. So that means that 40% is equal to 80 marbles. Now we want to find out 100%. We want to find out how many marbles are in the box altogether. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide both of these by 40. Now this is a non-calculator question, so we're going to divide by 40. So divide by 40 and divide by 40, and that'll tell us what 1% is. So 40 divided by 40 is 1%. That's why we're dividing by 40. And then 80 divided by 40 would be 2. So that's 1%. Now we want 100%. We want to find out how many marbles are in the box. So we're going to times by 100 and times by 100, and 100 times by 1 is 100%, that's why we're timesing by 100, and then 2 times 100 is equal to 200. That means there's 200 marbles in the box. So there's 200 marbles in the box, 80 of them are yellow, and then the rest would be the red ones, so that'd be 120. But the question just wants to know the total number of marbles in the box. The answer is 200, and that's it. Okay, so that was one approach. Now another approach is to consider multipliers. Now just keep in mind this is a non-calculator question, and whenever we're dealing with multipliers, often we're dealing with decimal numbers, so it can be a bit easier to use that first approach whenever you're looking at this question. Okay, but let's have a look at this using multipliers. So we know that 40% of the marbles are yellow, and there's 80 yellow marbles. So that means that if we took the number of marbles to begin with and we multiplied it by 0.4, because if you multiply something by 0.4, you find 40%. So if you take the number of marbles to begin with and you multiply that by 0.4, you're going to get 80. That's how many yellow marbles there are. So it means if we work backwards, if we take our 80 and we divide by the multiplier, we divide by 0.4. Now before we do that, I just want to go up here. If we had something like 6 divided by 3, that's equal to 2. And then if we times both of these numbers by 10 and we do 60 divided by 30, that's also equal to 2. Or if we times them both by, if we go back up to the beginning, we times both of them by 100, we get 600 divided by 300, that's also equal to 2. So if you multiply both the number you're dividing and the number you're dividing by, both by 10 or 100 and so on, you're still going to get the same answer. So here, if we had 80 divided by 0.4, we can times both of these by 10 to get 800 divided by 4, and when we do that division, we'll get the same answer. And 800 divided by 4 will be equal to 200. So that means that there were 200 marbles in the box to begin with. And that's it. So in this question, we know that 40% of the marbles were yellow. So we know that the multiplier would be 0.4. That's how we find 40% of something. And then we know there's 80 yellow marbles. So if we do 80 divided by 0.4, we get 200. And that's how many marbles were in the box to begin with. And in terms of this question, I probably would have used that first approach, but this approach would have worked as well. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 4. Okay, so question number 4, it's a calculator question. We're told that Ottawa is the capital city of Canada, and the population of Ottawa is 1,020,000. Now this is whenever I wrote this question, and this population is approximately, or is equal to 2.5% of the total population of Canada. What is the population of Canada? Obviously, whenever I wrote this. Okay, so if we have a look at this, we're told that 2.5% of Canada's population live in Ottawa, because the population is 2.5% of the total population of Canada, and we know that's equal to 1,020,000. So that means that this is equal to 2.5% of Canada's population. So in terms of this question, what we can do is we can write that down, that 2.5% of Canada's population of the total is equal to 1,020,000. we want to find out what the total population of Canada is. So we want to find out, first of all, what 1% is. So let's divide both of these by 2.5. So if we divide by 2.5 and divide by 2.5, we can then find out what 1% is. So if we take our 1,020,000 and divide that by 2.5, we get that's equal to 408,000. So that's then what 1% of Canada's population is. And then we just need to times by 100. So if we times by 100 and times by 100, we can then find out what the total population of Canada is or was. So 100% will be equal to, if we times by 100, that's equal to 40,800,000. And that's it. So that's the total population of Canada at the time of writing the question, 40,800,000. And that's it. So that's one approach. Another approach is to consider multipliers. So let's get rid of this. Okay, so if you were considering multipliers, now this question, we're not increasing or decreasing, we're just being told that 2.5% of the population is 1,020,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this percent to a decimal, and that'll be our multiplier. So if we wanted to work out 2.5% of something, we could multiply by 0.025. If you multiply something by 0.025, you get 2.5% of it. So if we take the answer, the 1,020,000, and we divide that by the multiplier, so remember with reverse percentages, you're working backwards, so you'll divide by the multiplier. So we're going to divide by 0.025. That'll tell us the population of Canada. So 1,020,000 divided by 0.025 is equal to 40,800,000. And that's it. That's the total population of Canada. And that's it. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 5. So question number 5 says the lamp is on sale at £22.05, and this is a 10% reduction of the normal price. So the price has been reduced by 10% to give this sale price. And the question is, what was the price of the lamp before the reduction? So this question is a reverse percentages question. We know that because it says what was the price before the reduction. So we want to go backwards and find out what the original value was before the reduction. So we know the price of the lamp has been reduced by 10%. So that means that if we had something and we reduced it by 10%, we're left with 90%. So 90% would be equal to £22.05. So £22.05. So that means that 90% is equal to £22.05. Now we want to find out what the original price was. That's 100%. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide both of these by 90 to begin with. So we're going to divide by 90. So divide by 90. And divide by 90, and this is great, it's a calculator question, so that's nice. So 90 divided by 90 is equal to 1%, and then we're going to do £22.05 divided by 90, and that's equal to 0.245. And now we want to find out what 100% is, so we're going to times by 100, and we're going to times by 100, and then that'll tell us what the original price of the lamp was. So 1% times 100 is 100%, the original price of the lamp, and then 0.245 times 100 is equal to £24.50. So £24.50. So that's the price of the lamp before the reduction. So how much was the price of the lamp before the reduction? The answer is £24.50. And that's it. So in this question, we were told that the price was reduced by 10%. So we're left with 90%. And that's equal to £22.05. We've then found 1%. And then we've times that by 100 to find 100%. And that's it. Okay, so that's one approach. Now let's have a look at multipliers. Okay, so let's have a look at this question, but now let's consider multipliers. So if we had the price of the lamp to begin with, we would have times it by, well, if something's been reduced by 10%, we're left with 90%. So that means our multiplier, if we reduce something by 10%, the multiplier would be 0.9. That's our multiplier. So that means that we would have taken the original amount of money and times it by 0.9 to get £22.05. So if we divide by the multiplier, if we take our £22.05 and we divide it by a multiplier, which is 0.9, that'll tell us the original amount. So if we divide by 0.9, that's equal to 24.5 or £24.50. That's the price of the lamp before the reduction. So if we just divide by what multiplier would have been used, then that'll tell us the original amount. So that's it. So £24.50. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. So question number 6 says, Jacob buys a watch costing £84, and this includes VAT at a rate of 20%. So the watch originally was 100%, and then VAT's added, so that's another 20%, so that's 120%. And then we're asked, how much is the watch without VAT? So we want to find out how much was the watch before the VAT was added, so we want to find the 100%. So we know that the price of the watch has been increased by 20% to include VAT, so that means we've got 120% is equal to £84, so £84. Now we want to find out the price of the watch without VAT. We want to find 100%. Now this is a non-calculator question. So we want to find 100%. Normally if this was a calculator question, I would divide both of these by 120 to find 1%, and then I would times both of them by 100 to find 100%. But because this is a non-calculator question, rather than dividing both of these by 120, because I then have to do 84 divided by 120, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to divide both of these by 12. Because if I divide both of them by 12, it'll just make the division a little bit easier. So I'm going to divide by 12 and divide by 12. 120 divided by 12 is 10%, because I can get to 10% and then go up to 100%. As long as I get to 100%, then that's okay. So then we're going to do 84 divided by 12, and 84 divided by 12, if you know your 7 times tables or your 12 times tables, you often know that that's equal to 7. So that's £7. So 84 divided by 12 is equal to 7. So we've got the 10% is equal to £7. Now we want 100%, so we're now going to times by 10 and times by 10, and that'll tell us 100%. So that would be 10 times 10 is 100, so that's 100% will be equal to, and then 7 times 10 is equal to £70. So that means the price of the watch before the VAT was added was £70. And well, let's just check that. If we increase that by 20%, but 10% is £7. 20% would be £14, and then if you added that on, you'd get you £84. So that's it. So how much is the watch without VAT? The answer is £70. And again, this question, it's a non-calculator question, so rather than dividing both of these by 120, I've actually chosen to divide both of them by 12, and it just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so that's that question. We've had a look at question number 6 using our method in terms of getting to 100%. Now let's have a look at it using multipliers. Okay, so in terms of this question, if we consider multipliers, well, the cost of the watch was increased by 20% to add the VAT on. So that means that we would have 120%. So as a multiplier, that would be 1.2. That's if you want to increase something by 20%, you times by 1.2. So that means the price of the watch was multiplied by 1.2 to give us £84. So if we divide by the multiplier, that will give us the price of the watch without VAT, or before the VAT was added. So £84 divided by 1.2. And if we do that division, we'll find the cost of the watch before the VAT was added. So we just need to do 84 divided by 1.2. Here we can do 84 divided by 1.2. We looked previously at the fact that if we had 6 divided by 3, that's equal to 2. If we had 60 divided by 30, if we times both of these by 10, we still get that's equal to 2, and so on. So we can times both of these numbers by 10 or 100 or 1,000 and so on, and we'll still get the same answer. So let's multiply both of these numbers by 10. That will give us 840 divided by 12. It just makes the division a little bit easier. So let's do 840 divided by 12 using our bus shelter method. So how many 12s are in 8? 0, remainder 8. How many 12s are in 84? That's 7. And how many 12s are in 0? That's 0. So the answer is 70. So that means that if we do 84 divided by 1.2, the answer is equal to 70. So the question says, how much was the watch without VAT? The answer is £70. And that's it. We've just divided by the multiplier. We've divided 84 by 1.2. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 7. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 7. And this is a non-calculator question, so I'm just putting down my calculator. And we're told a cafe sells 3 types of hot drinks: coffee, tea, or hot chocolate. So they're the 3 drinks that they sell. And on Tuesday morning, the cafe sold 96 coffees. So they sold 96 coffees on Tuesday morning. And this was 60% of the total of the hot drinks sold. So this is 60%. And the question said, work out the total number of hot drinks sold on Tuesday morning. Okay, so in this question, we're told that 60% of the total is 96. So let's write that down, that 60% of the total number of drinks sold was equal to 96. So we want to find out what 100% is. We want to find out how many drinks were sold in total. So in terms of this, what I could do is I could divide both of these by 60 to find 1%. And then once I find 1%, then times both by 100 to get 100%. That's a non-calculator question. So to make it a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both of these numbers by 6. I'm going to divide by 6, so divide by 6. And I'm also going to divide by 6, so divide by 6. 60 divided by 6 would be 10%, because once we find 10%, we can then find 100%. And then we're going to do 96 divided by 6. So 96 divided by 6, how many 6s go into 9? That's 1, remainder 3. And how many 6s go into 36? That would be 6. So that means that 10% is equal to 16. Now we know 10%, we can find 100%. We can find the number of hot drinks sold by just timesing by 10. So multiply by 10 and multiply by 10. So that means that 100% of the drinks sold, or hot drinks sold, would be equal to 16 times 10 is equal to 160. So it means that 160 hot drinks were sold on Tuesday morning. So that's it, that's our answer, 160. And in this question, we were told that 60% of the total was equal to 96. So then we just found 10% by dividing both of those numbers by 6 to get 10%, and then multiply both of those numbers by 10 to get 100%, which is 160. Okay, so that's one approach. So let's just drop that out, and now let's have a look at our multiplier approach. Okay, so if we were to consider multipliers, we were told that 96 coffees was 60% of the total of the hot drinks sold. So we know that if we had the number of hot drinks sold in total, we would times it by our multiplier, which is 0.6. To find 60% of something, you multiply by 0.6, and then our answer would be 96. So we're going to work backwards. We're going to divide by our multiplier. We're going to take the 96, and we're going to divide that by 0.6. And then when we do that, we'll find the total number of hot drinks sold. So we need to do 96 divided by 0.6. Now remember, this is a non-calculator question, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remember the fact that if we had 6 divided by 2, that's equal to 3, but also if we had 60 divided by 20, that's also equal to 3. So if we times both of these numbers by 10, we'll get the same answer. So if we do 960 divided by 6, that'll give us the same answer as this. So let's do 960 divided by 6. So how many 6's go into 9? 1 remainder 3. How many 6's go into 36? Well, 6 times 6 is 36, that'll be 6. And how many 6's go into 0? That's going to be 0. So the answer would be 160. So 160 hot drinks were sold on Tuesday morning. And that's it. We just divided by the multiplier. And just because this was a decimal, what we done was we multiplied both numbers by 10, and we would get the same answer if we do that. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 8. Okay, so question number 8, it's a calculator question, so we can pick up our calculator again if we want to. And we're told that Jennifer has 54 books, so she's got 54 books. And this number of books is 80% more than the number of books she had last month. So she had less books last month, and this month she's now got 80% more. And the question says, how many books did Jennifer have last month? So we're going backwards to find out how many books she had last month, so it's reverse percentages. Okay, so the number of books that she has now is 80% more. So if what she had last month was 100%, she now would have 180% because it's gone up by 80%. So that's 180%. And that was now equal to 54 books. So 54 books, because she's now got 80% more books than she had last month, so she would have 180%. And that's equal to 54 books. Now, it's a calculator question. Let's find 1% by dividing both of these numbers by 180. So divide by 180 and divide by 180. And when we do that, we get an answer of 0.3. So that means that 1% is equal to 0.3. Well, we want to find 100%, so now let's multiply by 100 and multiply by 100. 1 times 100 is equal to 100%, and 0.3 times 100 would be equal to 30. So that means that last month she had 30 books, and that's it. So that means that last month she had 30 books, and if you were to increase that by 80%, you'd get 54. So the question says, how many books did Jennifer have last month? The answer is 30. She had 30 books last month, and that's it. Okay, so now let's have a look at how we would approach this question using multipliers. Okay, so if we were to consider multipliers for this question, we now know that Jennifer's got 54 books, and this is 80% more than she had last month. So how many she had last month has been increased by 80%. So to increase something by 80%, that would be 180%. So as a multiplier, that would be 1.8 or 1.80. So that's the multiplier, 1.8 or 1.80. So if we want to go backwards and figure out how many books she had last month, we just need to divide by the multiplier. So let's take 54 and divide that by 1.8. And if we do 54 divided by 1.8 on our calculator, the answer will be equal to 30. So that means that last month Jennifer would have had 30 books. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 9. Okay, so question number 9. Lauren is given a 12% pay rise and her new salary is £24,080. And the question says, what was Lauren's salary before the pay rise? So obviously Lauren's pay has gone up by 12%. So if her pay has gone up by 12%, she would have had 100% to begin with. It's gone up by 12%, so she's now got 112%. So 112% is equal to what her salary is now, which is £24,080. So that's how much money she's got now. So we know that it's gone up by 12%, so it's now 112%. So 112% is £24,080. So we want to find out what her pay was before the pay rise. So we want to find 100%. So I'm going to divide both of these by 112. So I'm going to divide by 112 and divide by 112. And that'll tell us 1%. So 1% would be equal to, well, if we take our £24,080 and divide it by 112, let's see what we get. That's equal to 215. And then we want to find 100%, what her salary was before she had the pay rise. So we're going to multiply by 100. And then that would be 100% would be equal to, and then 215 times 100 would be 21,500. So that means that Lauren's pay before the pay rise was £21,500. And that's it. So in this question, we know she was given a 12% pay rise. So her salary's gone from 100% up to 112%. And this is equal to £24,080. We divided both of those by 112 to find 1%. And then we times by 100 to find that 100% her pay before the pay rise was 21,500. And that's it. Okay, so we were to consider using multipliers for this question instead. Well, Lauren was given a pay rise of 12%. So that means her pay has gone from 100% up to 112%. So to increase something by 12%, the multiplier would be 1.12. So if you multiply something by 1.12, then you would increase it by 12%. And now we know what her salary is, which is £24,080. So if we divide her salary now by the multiplier, we can find out what her pay was before the pay rise. So if we take the £24,080 and we divide it by the multiplier, 1.12, that'll tell us what Lauren's pay was before the pay rise. So £24,080 divided by 1.12 is equal to 21,500. So that means that Lauren's pay was £21,500, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 10. Okay, so question number 10. Question number 10 says a limited edition bag of flour contains 25% more than the standard bag, and the limited edition bag contains 650 grams of flour. And the question is, how much flour is in the standard bag? Okay, so let's let the amount of flour in the standard bag be 100%. This limited edition one contains 25% more, so that'll be 125%. So 125%, how much flour is in the limited edition bag, is equal to 650 grams. That's 650 grams because it contains 25% more than the standard bag. Okay, so now we want to find 1%. So let's divide by 125 and divide by 125. And we can find out how many grams of flour is in 1%. So 1% will be equal to 650 divided by 125 is equal to 5.2. So 5.2. Now we want to find out what 100% is, how much flour is in the standard bag. So we're going to multiply by 100 and multiply by 100. So we'll multiply by 100 and multiply by 100. And we'll find that 1% times 100 is 100%. And that's equal to 5.2 times 100 is 520. So that means there's 520 grams of flour in the standard bag. And that's it. Okay, another approach would be to consider our multipliers. Well, we know the limited edition bag contains 25% more flour than the standard bag. So if we want to increase something by 25%, the multiplier we would use would be 1.25. If you multiply something by 1.25, you increase it by 25%. And we know the answer. We know that whenever you've increased it by 25%, we've got an answer of 650 grams. So if we take the 650 and we divide it by the multiplier, the 1.25, we can find out how many grams of flour were in the standard bag. So 650 divided by 1.25 is equal to 520. So that means there's 520 grams of flour in the standard bag. And that's it. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 11. So question number 11 says a fish tank has sprung a leak and it loses 40% of its water. And there's now 363 litres of water in the fish tank. And the question says how much water is in the fish tank before the leak. Okay, so if we let the amount of water that's in the fish tank to begin with be 100%, it loses 45% of the water. So that means that 55% of the water is left. So 55%, and that's equal to 363. So 363. Now we want to find out how much water was in the fish tank before the leak. So we want to find 100%. So let's find 1% and then get 100%. So let's find 1%. So let's divide both of these numbers by 55. So divide by 55 and divide by 55. 55 divided by 55 is 1, so that's 1%. And then 363 divided by 55 is equal to 6.6, so 6.6. Now we want to find 100%, so that's going to be, we'll multiply by 100 and we'll multiply by 100. And that'll tell us how much water was in the fish tank before the leak. So 1 times 100 is 100%, how much water was in the fish tank to begin with. And then 6.6 times 100 is equal to 660. So there's 660 litres of water in the fish tank before the leak. And that's it. So just to recap, we were told in the question that the fish tank loses 45% of the water. That means there's 55% left, and that's equal to 363 litres. And then we found 1% and then found 100%. And that's it. Okay, so that's one approach. Now let's have a look at this question and consider multipliers. So we're told the fish tank sprung a leak and it loses 45% of its water. So that means it's been reduced by 45%. And if you want to reduce something by 45%, well, 100 take away 45 is 55, so that means that the multiplier would be 0.55. If you multiply something by 0.55, you reduce it by 45%. And then we're told that there's 363 litres of water left in the fish tank. So that means if we take the 363 and we divide that by the multiplier, that'll tell us how many litres of water were in the fish tank before it had a leak. So 363 divided by 0.55 is equal to 660 litres. and that's it. So if we want to find out how much water was originally in the fish tank, we could divide by the multiplier. So if we reduce by 45%, then the multiplier we would use would be 0.55. If we took the amount of water that was in the fish tank before and we multiply by 0.55, we would get an answer of 363 litres. So if we divide the 363 by 0.55, that'll tell us how much water is in the fish tank to begin with, which is 660 litres. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 12. Okay, so question number 12, it's a calculator question, and we're told that Mrs. Reed buys a van costing £11,760, and this cost includes VAT at a rate of 20%. So obviously the van to begin with is 100%. It includes VAT at a rate of 20%, so that means 120% is equal to £11,760. £11,760. And this question, we're asked how much is the VAT. So in this question, we could approach it in a few different ways. We could find out how much the van would cost originally without the VAT, and then take that away to see how much the VAT would be. Or we could find out what the 20% is. What I'm going to do in this question is I'm going to find the cost of the van without the VAT to begin with, just to show you that method to begin with, okay? So because the cost includes VAT at a rate of 20%, we've now got 120%. The cost of the van is 100% and the VAT is 20%, so that's 120%, and that's equal to £11,760. Okay, I'm going to find 100%, which is the cost of the van without VAT. So let's divide by 120 and divide by 120. And that'll tell us 1%. So 1% would be equal to £11,760 divided by 120 is equal to 98. So 1% is 98. We want to find 100%, so let's multiply by 100 and multiply by 100. And when we multiply both of those by 100, we get the 100%, the cost of the van without VAT, would be equal to 9,800. So that means that the van without VAT would be £9,800. Now, we want to work out how much the VAT is. So if we take the cost including VAT, and we subtract the cost of the van without VAT, then the difference would be how much the VAT is. So we could do £11,760, take away 980, and that's equal to 11,760 subtract 9,800, and that's equal to £1,960. So that means the VAT is £1,960. And that's it. Okay, so that's one approach to that question. What we could have done instead of, whenever we found a 1%, we could have just multiplied by 20 to find 20%, because that's what the VAT was, 20%. So if you just multiplied here by 20, you would get 1,960. So that would work as well. Okay. Or also another approach would be, because we know that 120% is equal to £11,760, a bit of a shortcut to find this 20% is, instead of finding 1%, we could just divide both of these by 6. So if you take a price including VAT, and as long as the VAT rate is 20%, if you just divide it by 6, you'll find how much the VAT is. So if you just take £11,760 and divide it by 6, you'll get the VAT straight away, because if you divide 120 by 6, you get 20%. So that would work as long as the VAT rate is 20%. Okay, so that's one approach. Okay, so now let's consider multipliers. So in this question, we're told the cost of the van is £11,760, and this cost includes VAT at a rate of 20%. So it's been increased by 20%. So the multiplier would have been 1.2 or 1.20, because if you multiply something by 1.2 or 1.20, that increases it by 20%. So if we take the cost of the van including VAT and we divide that by the multiplier 1.2, that'll tell us the cost of the van without VAT. So £11,760 divided by 1.2 is equal to 9,800. So the cost of the van excluding VAT is £9,800. And then if we want to work out how much the VAT is, we can take the £11,760 and take away the 9,800, and that's equal to £1,960. So the VAT is £1,960. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 13. Okay, so question number 13 says, in a sale, the price of a sofa is reduced by 70%, and the sale price is £255. Work out the price before the sale. Okay, so the price of the sofa is reduced by 70%, so that means we've left with 30%. There'll be 30% left, and that's equal to £255. £255. Because it's been reduced by 70%, we're left with 30% to pay for, and that's £255. Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide both of these by 30. We want to find out what 100% is, so we're going to divide both of these by 30. So divide by 30 and divide by 30. And then we can find out what 1% is. So 1% is equal to, and if we do 255 divided by 30, that's equal to 8.5. So 8.5. And then if we multiply by 100, and multiply by 100, we can then find out 100%. So the price of the sofa without any reductions. So 100% is equal to, and 8.5 times 100 would be £850. So the price before the sale is £850, and that's it. Okay, let's look at this question using multipliers. Okay, so in this question, we're told the price of the sofa is reduced by 70%. And if you want to reduce something by 70%, well, if you've got 100% to begin with, you reduce it by 70%, you're left with 30%. So as a multiplier, that would be 0.3. If you multiply something by 0.3, you reduce it by 70%. So that's what the multiplier would have been. And the answer is £255. So if we take that £255 and we divide by the multiplier, we can then find out what the original amount would have been. So 255 divided by 0.3 is equal to £850, and that's it. So that's the price before the sale. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 14. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 14. So Cormac buys a new bicycle and he has a voucher that gives him 6% off the usual price, and he pays £799 for the bicycle. And the question says, how much money did Cormac save using the voucher? Work out how much money Cormac saved using the voucher. So my approach that I'm going to use for this question will be to work out the cost of the bicycle before the discount. So work out the usual price of the bicycle. And then we know he paid £799, so we can then take that away to see how much money he saved using the voucher. So the voucher gave him 6% off the usual price. So that means if he saves 6%, that means he paid 94%. So 94% would be equal to £799, £799. Because we saved 6%, so he paid 94%, and that's £799. Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 94 and divide by 94 to find 1%. So divide by 94 and divide by 94. So 1% would be equal to, and if we do 799 divided by 94, so that's equal to 8.5. Now we want to find 100%, so let's multiply by 100 and let's multiply by 100. So multiply by 100, multiply by 100, and we would get the 100%, the usual cost of the bicycle, would be equal to £850. So the bicycle would normally cost £850. Now the question didn't ask us how much the bicycle normally costs, it asks us how much money did he save by using the voucher. So he paid £799. So if we take the 850 and take away £799, that's how much money he saved, which is £51. So Cormac saved £51 by using the voucher, and that's it. Okay, another approach that we could use for this question is to use a multiplier. So the voucher reduced the price by 6%. So if you want to reduce something by 6%, the multiplier would be 0.94, because you had 100% to begin with, you reduce it by 6%, so that's 94%, and as a decimal number, that's 0.94. So if we divide the £799 by 0.94, that'll tell us the usual cost of the bicycle. So £799 divided by 0.94 is equal to £850. So the bicycle normally costs £850. So £850 is the normal cost of the bicycle, but we want to work out how much money he saved by using the voucher. So he paid £799. So if we take away £799, the difference is how much he saved, which is £51. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 15. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 15. So question number 15 says, Rosie sold her house for £180,000 and the price of her house depreciated, that means went down, by 6.25% since Rosie originally bought it. So the price of her house actually went down. And the question says, work out how much Rosie originally paid for her house. So obviously that's going to be more than what she sold it for. So in this question, we're told that the value of her house, or the price of her house, depreciated, so it went down by 6.25%. So let's take this away from 100. So let's do 100 subtract 6.25, and 100 take away 6.25 is equal to 93.75. So that means that 93.75%, because it went down by 6.25%, so 93.75% is equal to £180,000. So £180,000. So that's how much she sold the house for. We want to find 100% how much she originally paid for the house. So let's divide both of these. Let's divide by 93.75 and divide by 93.75. And then that'll tell us 1%. So 1% will be equal to 180,000 divided by 93.75 is equal to 1,920. Now that's 1%, let's multiply by 100, and then let's multiply by 100, that'll just put 2 zeros on the end, so it'll be 1920, and then 00, or £192,000. So that's how much she originally bought the house for, and then she sold it for £180,000 because the price went down by 6.25%, and that's it. So the question said, how much money did Rosie originally pay for the house? It's £192,000, that's how much she originally bought the house for. Okay, let's have a look at that question, consider multipliers. Okay, so again, Rosie sold her house for £180,000, and the price of her house had depreciated or went down by 6.25%. So again, if we take 100 and take away 6.25, that's equal to 93.75. So if we wanted to use a multiplier to decrease something by 6.25%, the multiplier would be 0.9375. So if you multiply something by 0.9375, it'll decrease it by 6.25%. So that means that if we take the answer, the 180,000, so 180,000, and we divide it by the multiplier, 0.9375, that'll tell us how much she bought the house for. So £180,000 divided by 0.9375 is equal to £192,000. And that's it. So that means that she paid £192,000 for the house originally. And that's it. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 16. So question number 16 says the number of visitors to the museum increased by 16.4% between 2022 and 2023. And the number of visitors in 2023 was 97,776. And we've been asked to work out the number of visitors to the museum in 2022. So this is a reverse percentages question because we want to go backwards. We want to find out how many visitors the museum had in 2022. And if we let the number of visitors in the museum in 2022 be 100%, the number of visitors increased by 16.4%. So that means that in 2023, that'll be 116.4%. And that's equal to 97,776. So what we want to do is we want to find 1%. So let's divide both of these. Let's divide by 116.4. And that'll tell us 1%. And then once we know 1%, we can times by 100 to find 100%. So let's take our 97,776 and divide it by 116.4. And that's equal to 840. Now we want to find 100%. So let's multiply by 100 and let's multiply by 100. And if we multiply both of these numbers by 100, we'll find 100%, what we're looking for, the number of visitors in 2022, and that's equal to 84,000. So the museum had 84,000 visitors in 2022, and that's it. Okay, another approach that we could use for this question is to consider multipliers. If the number of visitors to the museum increased by 16.4%, that means we would have 116.4%, or as a decimal number, 1.164. So if you multiply something by 1.164, that increases it by 16.4%. And we know once it's been increased by 16.4%, the answer is 97,776. So if we take that 97,776 and we divide it by the multiplier, the 1.164, that'll tell us how many visitors were in the museum in 2022. So 97,776 divided by 1.164 is equal to 84,000. So the museum had 84,000 visitors in 2022, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 17. Okay, so question number 17 is a non-calculator question, so I'm putting down the calculator. And we're told that Lucas cycled 10% further in October than he did in September. So he cycled 10% further. So if he cycled 100% in September, he cycled 10% further, which would be 110% in October. And he cycled 308 kilometers in October. And the question says, work out how much further Lucas cycled in October than September. So what I'm going to do in this question is I'm going to figure out how many kilometers Lucas cycled in September to begin with, because he cycled 10% further in October. So that means that 110% would be equal to 308 kilometers. Okay, now in terms of this question, we want to find 100%. Now we could, if we wanted to, divide both of these numbers by 110 and that'll tell us 1%. Now what I'm actually going to do is, because this is a non-calculator question, I'm actually going to divide by 11. I'm going to divide by 11 and I'm going to divide by 11. Because if I divide by 11, I'll get 10%, because 110 divided by 11 is 10%. And then if I do 308 divided by 11, I can figure out what 10% is. So let's do 308 divided by 11 and see what we get. So how many 11s go into 3? 0, remainder 3. How many 11s go into 30? That's going to be 2, because 11, 22, that's going to be 2. So 2, remainder 8. Oh, fantastic. And how many 8s go into 88? That's going to be 8. So that means that 10% is equal to 28. And we want to find out what 100% is, so let's multiply by 10 and multiply by 10 and see what we get. So 10% times by 10 will be 100%, so that's how far he cycled in September, and that'd be equal to 28 times 10 is 280, so it's 280 kilometers. So how far did he cycle in September? 280 kilometers. Now the question actually says how much further did he cycle in October than September? So if we do our 308 subtract our 280, that'll tell us how much further he cycled in October than September. So 8 take away 0 is 8. Let's borrow here, so that's going to be 10 take away 8, which is 2, and 2 take away 2 is 0. So the answer is 28 kilometers. He cycled 28 kilometers further in October than September, and that's it. Okay, now we could also approach this question using multipliers. So he cycled 10% further in October than in September. So if we've increased something by 10%, the multiplier would be 1.1. If you multiply something by 1.1, you increase it by 10%. And the answer, after it's been increased by 10%, is 308 kilometers. So if we take the 308 kilometers and we divide that by 1.1, that'll tell us what the original amount was. It'll tell us how far he cycled in September. So we need to divide 308 by the multiplier, 1.1. So let's do that. Now here, instead of dividing by 1.1, I'm going to multiply both of these by 10 to get 3080 divided by 11. Because remember, if you do something like 6 divided by 2, that's equal to 3. If you do 60 divided by 20, that's also equal to 3. So if you multiply both of these values by 10, you'll get the same answer. So we want to do 3080 divided by 11. And then when we do that, that'll tell us how far Lucas cycled in September. So how many 11s go into 3? 0, remainder 3. How many 11s go into 30? That'll be 2, that's 22, remainder 8. How many 11s go into 88? That's equal to 8. And how many 11s go into 0? That's equal to 0. So he cycled 280 kilometers in September. Now the question says how much further did he cycle in October than September, so we're going to take our 308, how far he cycled in October, and subtract how far he cycled in September, which is equal to 280, and then if you take that away you get 28. So he cycled 28 kilometers further in October than September, and that's it. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 18. So question number 18 says, Amelia saves £350 each month for a year towards a car. And she buys the car by paying a deposit and 60 monthly payments of £180. And Amelia uses the money she saved to pay 80% of the deposit and will then be asked to work out the total cost of the car. Okay, because in this question we weren't actually told what the deposit is. We just know she pays a deposit and 60 monthly payments. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to work out how much money she saved to begin with. So she saves £350 a month towards the car. So that's £350 multiplied by 12, because there's 12 months in a year. And if we do 350 multiplied by 12, that's equal to £4,200. So she saved £4,200 towards the price of the car. And then she buys the car, paying a deposit and then 60 monthly payments. Let's work out what these monthly payments add up to be. So 60 multiplied by 180 is equal to £10,800. So £10,800. And then we're told that she uses the money she saved. So this is the money she saved. This is the money she saved to pay 80% of the deposit. So this is 80% of the deposit. So let's work out what the deposit is. So 80% of the deposit is equal to £4,200. This is a calculator question, so that's quite nice. So we want to find out what 100% is, because if we can work out what 100% is, that's the deposit. Then we can add on this 10,800, and then that's the total price of the car. Okay, so let's find 1%. So let's divide both of these by 80. So divide by 80 and divide by 80 and see what we get. So 4,200 divided by 80 is equal to 52.5, and that's 1%. Now we're going to times by 100 and times by 100, and then that'll tell us what 100% is, which is the whole deposit. So 100% will be equal to 52.5 times 100 is equal to £5,250. So that's how much the deposit is. The deposit is £5,250. Now she pays the deposit and 60 monthly payments, so she pays this as well. In total, the 60 monthly payments of £180. So if we do 5,250 plus £10,800, that's equal to the total price of the car. So if we add those, what do we get? We get that's equal to £16,050. So the total price of the car is £16,050, and that's it. Okay, so another approach to this question is to use multipliers. So what we could do in this question is, well, she saves £320 each month for a year towards a car. So let's take our £350 and multiply that by 12, and that's equal to 350 times 12 is equal to £4,200. So that's how much money Amelia has saved. And then she buys the car, paying a deposit, we don't know how much that is, and then 60 monthly payments. So 60 multiplied by £180 is equal to £10,800. So that's how much she pays in the monthly payments. She uses the money that she saved, so this amount of money, that's how much she saves, to pay 80% of the deposit. So this is fantastic. We can now work out how much the deposit is. And then we can if we know how much the deposit is, we can then add on the monthly payments and then find the total cost of the car. So in terms of the deposit, well, the money she saved, this amount, is equal to 80% of the deposit. So that means if she was using a multiplier, well, if that's 80% of the deposit, the multiplier would be 0.8, because to find 80% of something, you multiply by 0.8. So if we divide how much money she saved, the 4,200, by the multiplier 0.8, that'll tell us how much the deposit will be. So if we take 4,200 and we divide it by 0.8, that's equal to £5,250. So that's how much the deposit is. And then if we add on the monthly payments, if we take the £5,250 and we add £10,800, that'll tell us how much the car is in total, and that's equal to £16,050. And that's it. So £16,050, that's how much the car is. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 19. So question number 19 says, Aisha bought a house 2 years ago, and the value of the house increased by 10% over the first year. So whenever she bought it, it increased by 10% over the first year, and then it increased by another 8% over the following year. And the house is now valued at £291,060. And the question says, work out how much money Aisha paid for the house 2 years ago. So this is a reverse percentages question, because it's obviously there's been an increase of 10%, an increase of 8%. We know how much it's worth now, and we want to go backwards and find the price of the house last year and then the year before whenever she bought it. So let's start off by finding the price of the house last year. Well, over the last year it increased by 8%. We need to work backwards because it increased by 10% and then increased by 8%. We need to go backwards and find out how much it was before the 8% increase and then before the 10% increase. So over the last year it increased by 8%. So let's find out how much it was worth last year. Okay, so in terms of over the last year, well, it's now worth £291,060, and it's increased by 8%, so that's 108%. So 108% is equal to £291,060, and this is to find the price of the house last year. Okay, so if we have a look at this, if we divide both of these by 108, so if we divide by 108 and divide by 108, that'll tell us 1%. So 1% is equal to, and then if we do it in our calculator, £291,060, and divide that by 108, that's equal to £2,695. And then if we times by 100 and times by 100, so times by 100 and times by 100, so that's 100% is equal to £269,500. So just multiply that by 100. Okay, so we now know the price of the house last year, but then, because obviously the house increased by 10% and then increased by 8%, we've gone backwards and found out how much it's worth before the 8% increase. We need to go back again and figure out how much it was before that 10% increase. So we know that this is how much it was last year. We want to find the year before. So we know that 110% after that 10% increase, the price of the house was £269,500. So let's find 1%. So let's divide by 110 and divide by 110, and we'll get that 1% is equal to, and if we divide this by 110, 269,500, and divide by 110, that's equal to £2,450. And then if we times by 100 and times by 100, that'll tell us how much the house was whenever Aisha bought it. So if we do 100%, that's equal to £245,000. So that's how much the house was whenever Aisha bought it. It was £245,000. And you can check it. If you take that amount of money and you increase it by 10%, get that answer, and increase it by 8%, you should get that answer. And that's it. So that's one approach. Now actually with this question, I would actually use the multiplier approach for this question, and I'll show you that now. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so this question, I definitely would use a multiplier approach for this question. So Aisha bought a house 2 years ago. It increased by 10% over the first year. So to increase something by 10%, the multiplier would be 1.1 or 1.10. And then it increased by another 8%. So if you want to increase something by 8%, then that multiplier would be 1.08. If you multiply something by 1.08, it increases it by 8%. And the house is now valued at £291,060. So Aisha bought the house. She paid this amount for it. So it increased by value in 10%, so it could be multiplied by 1.1, that would increase it by 10%, and then that would be the price after the first year, and then the value increased by another 8%, so it's been multiplied again by 1.08, and the answer is equal to £291,060. So what we're going to do is we're going to work backwards, so we're going to take that £291,060, we're going to divide it by 1.08, so 1.08, we'll get the price last year, and then we can divide by 1.1, and then that will give us the value of the house whenever she first bought it. So let's take the £291,060 and divide that by 1.08, and that'll be the price of the house after the first year. So £291,060 divided by 1.08 is equal to 269,500. So that's the price of the house after the first year. Now we need to go back again, so we need to divide by 1.1. So let's take the 269,500 and divide that by 1.1, and that'll tell us the price of the house whenever she bought it, and that's equal to £245,000. So that's it. So the price of the house whenever Aisha first bought it was £245,000, and that's it, £245,000. And that's it. So in terms of that question, because it increased by 10% and then increased by 8%, you could just divide by the multiplier. So you could divide by 1.08 and then 1.1, and then that'll tell you your answer, just working backwards. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 20. Okay, so question number 20, there are 6,000 people at an ice hockey match. So there's 6,000 people at an ice hockey match, and the announcer has said that this is exactly 40% more people than the previous match. Explain why the announcer is incorrect. Okay, so the announcer's saying that this 6,000 people is exactly 40% more people than the previous match. So if it's gone up by 40%, we would have 140%, because if we say the number of people at the last match was 100%, if it's gone up by 40%, that's 140%. And that's equal to 6,000 people. Now, if we divide by 140 and we divide by 140, we can find 1%, so divide by 140. So 140 divided by 140 is 1%. And that's equal to, and if we do 6,000 divided by 140, that's equal to 42.857142, and so on. And that's 1%, so now it's times by 100 and times by 100. And I think I know the issue here already, because if we times this by 100, we're not going to get an exact number of people. So 1 times 100 is 100%, and then if we times this by 100, so multiply by 100, that's going to be equal to 4,285.7142, and so on. Now the announcer says that the number of people at this match is exactly 40% more than the previous match. Now if that was the case and it was exactly 40% more, that means that the last match there would have been 4,285.7142 and so on people. Now that's not possible, because obviously this would have to be a whole number. So let's explain that. And that's it. I was just explaining that since 4,285.714 and so on is not a whole number, the announcer must be wrong. It can't be exactly 40% more. And that's it. Okay, now if we were to approach this question using a multiplier, well, we're told there's 6,000 people in an ice hockey match, and the announcer says it's exactly 40% more than the previous match. So if it's 40% more, that's 140%, or as a multiplier, 1.4. If you multiply something by 1.4, you increase it by 40%. So if we take the 6,000 and we divide that by 1.4, that'll tell us how many people were at the last match. And if we do 6,000 divided by 1.4, that's equal to 4,285.7142 and so on. Now that can't be the case, because if the attendance at this match is exactly 40% more than the previous match, well, this can't happen. This has to be a whole number. It can't be a decimal number, because that can't happen. So let's explain that. And that's how I've just explained that the announcer is incorrect, as that would mean the attendance at the last match would have been 4,285.714 and so on, and that's impossible. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 21. Okay, so question number 21 says that Killian has saved 79% more money than his brother Rufus, and altogether they have £1,618.20 in savings. And the question says, work out how much money Killian has saved. Okay, so Killian has saved 79% more than his brother Rufus. So let's let his brother Rufus have 100% in savings. So he's got 100%. And that means that if Killian saved 79% more, that means that he's got 179%. So that means that if Rufus had 100%, Killian would have 179% because he's got 79% more. Now we're told that altogether they have in savings £1,618.20. So that means if we add up Rufus's savings and Killian's savings, altogether that would be £1,618.20. So let's add together these percentages. So 100% plus 179% would be 279%. That's their savings added together. And that's equal to £1,618.20. Now, if we can now find 1%, then once we find 1%, we could then find 100%, and then that would be how much Rufus would have. And we could also find 179%, that's how much Killian would have, and then that's how much money he saved. Okay, so let's find 1%. So let's divide by 279, and let's divide by 279. So 279 divided by 279, that's 1%. That's why we're dividing by 279. And that's equal to, if we do £1,618.20 divided by 279, that's equal to 5.8. Now that's 1%. Let's times that by 100. So let's times by 100 and times by 100 to find 100%. So times by 100 would be 100%, and that would be equal to £580. So that means that Rufus has saved £580. Now at this point we could just take this away from the grand total to find out how much Killian's got. Or alternatively, actually we could go back to this point, and instead of timesing by 100, we could have times both of these by 179. So if you do 5.8 times 179, you get that's equal to £1,038.20. So that's how you could find how much money Killian's got. But also what you could do is take how much money they've got all together, the £1,618.20, and take away the £580, and that's equal to, again, £1,038.20, and that's it. And that's how much money Killian saved, and that's it. Okay, let's have a look at this question, and this time I'm going to use multipliers rather than that other approach. So what I'm going to do is, Killian has saved 79% more money than his brother Rufus. So I'm going to let the amount of money that Rufus has saved be Y pounds. I'm going to do this question using a bit of algebra. So I'm going to say Rufus has saved Y pounds. That's how much money he saved to begin with. Now Killian has saved 79% more. So that means that we're going to increase this by 79%. So if this was 100%, to increase by 79%, you'd multiply by 1.79. That would be the multiplier, 1.79. So that means that if you take how much money Rufus have, which is Y pounds, and you multiply by 1.79, that'll increase it by 79%. So that means that Rufus is Y pounds, and that means Killian would have 1.79 Y, because it's 1.79 times Y. That would increase it by 79%. So that means that we've got Rufus's amount of money, Y. We've got Killian's amount of money, 1.79Y, because it's 1.79 times whatever his is. And then if we add them together, altogether they've got this amount in savings. So if we add them together, that would be equal to £1,618.20. Okay, now let's add these together. Now we've got Y plus 1.79Y. Now Y is the same as 1Y, and if we add them together, 1Y plus 1.79Y will be 2.79Y, and that's equal to £1,618.20. So we've now got an equation. We just need to solve this. So we just need to divide by this multiplier. So we just need to divide by 2.79 and divide by 2.79. Remember, to solve equations, you just divide both sides by what you're timesing the y by here. So we're going to divide both sides by 2.79. So we're dividing by 2.79 to get rid of the times by 2.79. So we're left with y. And then if we do 1,618.2 divided by 2.79, that's equal to £580. So that means that Rufus has got £580, that's Y. I remember that Killian is actually 1.79Y. For Killian, we would then do, Killian is 1.79 times Y, so it's going to be 1.79 multiplied by Y, which is 580. And if we do that, we get an answer of 1.79 times 580 is equal to £1,038.20. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 22. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 22. So Lorcan has red and green apples, and a quarter of the apples are green. So a quarter are green, and then obviously 3/4 are red. He puts the apples in two boxes, A and B, And 65% of the green apples are placed in box A. So 65% of the green apples go into box A. And there's 133 green apples in box B. And the question says, work out how many red apples Lorcan has. Okay, so in terms of this question, we want to find out how many red apples he's got. But what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm going to focus on the green apples here, because we're told that 65% of the green apples are placed in box A, and then we're told that there's 133 green apples in box B, and that's the rest of them. So if 65% of the green apples are placed in box A, that means the rest, which is 35% of them, are placed in box B, and that's equal to 133. So that means 133 green apples in box B represents 35% of the green apples. So let's find out how many green apples there are altogether. So let's find 1%. So let's divide by 35 and divide by 35. So divide by 35 and divide by 35. So we get that 1% is equal to, and then on our calculator, 133 divided by 35 is equal to 3.8. So 3.8. And now we'll times by 100 and times by 100. So times by 100 and times by 100. And we'll get that 100%. So 100% is equal to, and 3.8 times 100 is 380. So there's 380 green apples altogether. So it's 380 green apples. So 380 green apples. Okay, now if we have a look at this, we're told that he's got red and green apples and a quarter of them are green. So a quarter of them, 25% of them. So 25% of the apples are green. So that means that we can work out how many apples there are altogether. So we know that 25% of them is equal to 380. And that means then if we divide by 25 and divide by 25, we can find 1%. So 25 divided by 25 is 1. And 380 divided by 25, 380 divided by 25 is equal to 15.2, 15.2. And then if we times by 100 and times by 100, we'll find out how many apples there are. So times by 100 and times by 100. And that means that 100% is equal to, and then 15.2 times 100 would be equal to 1,520 apples. So there's 1,520 apples altogether. Now the question says, how many red apples does Lorcan have? Well, at this point, actually, rather than multiplying both by 100, we could have multiplied both of these by 75 to find out how many red apples he's got. Or we could take the grand total, the 1,520, and subtract the 380 green apples there are to find out how many red apples there are. So 1,520 subtract 380 is equal to 1,140. So there's 1,140 red apples, and that's it. Okay, so we're now going to approach this question using our multipliers. So, and again, let's read the question. Lorcan has got red and green apples. A quarter of the apples are green, so a quarter of them are green. So that means the rest, 3/4, are red, or 25% of them are green and 75% of them are red. All the apples are put into two boxes, A and B. 65% of the apples are placed in, 65% of the green apples are placed in box A, and there's 133 green apples in box B. So in other words, that means that here, if 65% of the green apples are placed in box A, the rest of them, this 133 of them, is equal to 35%, the rest of them. So this is 35%. So if we want to find 35% of the green apples, we would have taken the number of green apples and times it by 0.35, and that would have given us 133. So if we take the 133 and divide that by 0.35, that'll tell us how many green apples there are. So 133 divided by 0.35 is equal to 380. So there's 380 green apples. So 380 green apples. We're then told that a quarter of the apples are green. So altogether there's 380 green apples. A quarter of them are green. So that's 25% of them. So if we knew how many apples there are altogether, we would have times it by 0.25 to find 25%. And that would be 380. So if we take the 380 and divide that by 0.25, that'll tell us how many apples there are altogether. So 380 divided by 0.25 is equal to 1,520. So that's how many apples there are altogether. Now, if we want to find out how many red apples there are, we can just take away the 380 away from the 1,520, and that'll tell us how many red apples there are. And if we do that, we get an answer of 1,140. And that's it. That's our answer. That's how many red apples there are. Okay, let's have a look at our next question. Question number 23. So question number 23 says, a football team has won 12% of the matches they've ever played. So if they've won 12% of the matches they've ever played, that means they haven't won 88%. So 88% they've not won, not won. I've done that on purpose because it could be a draw or lose, so I've just written not won. So if they've won 12%, that means they haven't won 88% of the matches. And then we're told they have drawn a quarter of the rest of the matches. So if we work out a quarter of this, that'll tell us what percentage of the matches that they draw. So if we do 88 divided by 4, that's equal to 22%. So that means that they have drawn 22% of the matches. So they've drawn 22%, they've won 12%, and then the rest of the matches, well, if we do 12 plus 22, that's equal to 34%. So that means that they have won or drawn 34% of their matches, and the rest they've lost, obviously. So if we do 100, take away 34, that's equal to 66%. So that means that they have lost 66% of their matches. So just to recap that, a football team's won 12% of the matches they've ever played. So that means that they haven't won 88%. We're then told they've drawn a quarter of the rest of the matches. So that's a quarter of the 88%. So that's going to be 22%, just dividing by 4. So that means they've drawn 22% of all their matches. And then we've added those together, the 12 and the 22. So that means they have won or drawn 34% of the matches. So that means they've lost the rest, which is 66%. Then we're told the football team has lost 924 matches, and we've been asked to work out the total number of matches they've played. Okay, so we know that 66% is equal to 920 matches. And then if we divide by 66, so divide by 66 and divide by 66, we can find 1%. So 1% is equal to, and if we do 924 divided by 66, that's equal to 14. And then if we times by 100, and times by 100, we'll find out the 100%. So 100%, how many matches they've played altogether, is equal to 1,400. So this football team has played 1,400 matches ever. And that's it. So that's how we've done that question. Okay, so if I was to use a multiplier technique for this question, I would have actually started the question off in the same approach. I would have said, well, if they've won 12%, that means they haven't won 88%. They've drawn a quarter of the rest of the matches. So if we divide that by 4, that's 22%. So that means they've won 12% and drawn 22%. And that means the rest, the 66%, is how much they've lost. Okay, so now we know that they've lost 924 matches. So the multiplier to find out how many they lost would be 0.66, because that is a multiplier. If you want to find 66% of a number, the multiplier is 0.66. So if I just take 924 and divide by 0.66, that's equal to how many matches they've played, which is 1,400. And that's it. Okay, so let's have a look at our last question, question number 24. So question number 24 says, Amy and Poppy were both given a pay rise, and Amy's been given a 25% pay rise, and Poppy was given a 4% pay rise. That's it seems a bit unfair, but maybe it's not. We'll have a look at the salaries. The ratio of Amy's salary to Poppy's salary is now 9 to 13. So the ratio now is 9 to 13. So that means that, for instance, if Amy was there £9,000, Poppy would earn £13,000, and so on. And that Poppy's pay before the pay rise was £50,000. Work out Amy's pay before the pay rise. Okay, so Poppy's pay before the pay rise was £50,000. Now she was given a 4% pay rise, so let's work out her salary now. So let's take her £50,000 and let's increase it by 4%. Now, if we're using a technique not using multipliers, we would divide this by 100 to find 1%. So if we divide that by 100, that's equal to £500. And then we're going to times that by 4. Times by 4, that's equal to £2,000. So that means she's been given an extra £2,000. So that means that Poppy's pay now is £52,000. £52,000. That is Poppy's pay now. Poppy's pay now. Okay, so that's how much Poppy's paid now. Now the question wants us to work out how much money Amy's paid before the pay rise. Well, let's find out how much money Amy's paid now, because we now know that the ratio of Amy's salary to Poppy's salary is 9 to 13. So if we know that Poppy's pay is now £50,000, we can divide that by 13 and then times that by 9 to find Amy's current pay. So if we take £52,000 and we divide that by 13, that's equal to £4,000. And then if we times that by 9, Amy's number in the ratio, 4,000 multiplied by 9, that's equal to £36,000. So £36,000. So that's Amy's pay now. So that's Amy's pay now. Okay, so that's Amy's pay now, but we want to find out Amy's pay before the pay rise. So if we have a look at Amy's pay, well, her pay went up by 25%. So that means if her pay before the pay rise was 100%, it's now 125%. So 125% is equal to £36,000. So that means that 125% is equal to £36,000. So let's divide by 125 and divide by 125 and see what we get. So that would be 1% is equal to and then 36,000 divided by 125 is equal to 288. And then if we times by 100 and times by 100, we'll get her pay now. So that means, well, that'd be 100% is equal to, and then this would be 28,800. So that's how much money Amy's paid before the pay rise, £28,800. And we can check this. If we were to take Amy's pay and increase that by 25%, then that would be £36,000. We can take Poppy's pay before the salary, or before the pay rise, which was £50,000, increase that by 4%, and that's £52,000. And then just cancel down that ratio of 36,000 to 52,000, and that would simplify down to 9 to 13. So we know we're right, and that's it. Okay, let's have a look at this question again using a multiplier technique. Okay, so if we were using multipliers and we want to do reverse percentage using multipliers, again, we're told that Amy's given a 25% pay rise, so that multiplier would be 1.25. Poppy's been given a 4% pay rise, so that multiplier would be 1.04. And the ratio of Amy's salary to Poppy's salary now is 9 to 13. Poppy's pay before the pay rise was £50,000. So let's take the £50,000 and let's multiply that by the multiplier 1.04 to increase it by 4%. And that's equal to £52,000. So that is Poppy's current pay, so Poppy's pay now. Okay, so that's Poppy's new pay, £52,000. Now we're told the ratio of Amy's pay to Poppy's pay is now 9 to 13. So if we take this £52,000 and we divide it by 13 and then times it by 9, we can find Amy's salary. So £52,000 divided by 13 is equal to £4,000. And then if we take the £4,000 and then multiply that by 9, that will then give us Amy's pay now. And then 4,000 times 9 is equal to £36,000. So that is Amy's current pay, so Amy's new pay. Okay, so we now know Amy's new pay. We want to find Amy's pay before the pay rise. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to divide by the multiplier. So we're going to take the £36,000 and divide by what multiplier would have been used, which is 1.25, and that is equal to £28,800. So that is Amy's pay before the pay rise. And that's it. So that's it. In this video, we've gone through the video solutions to the reverse percentages practice questions. I've gone through them in two different techniques, using the one where we write down the percentage equals so much and then find 1% and then find 100%. And we've also looked at using the multiplier, so dividing by the multiplier to go backwards. I hope you found this video useful. If you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you need any extra help on reverse percentages, if you go to the videos and worksheets section on the Corbettmaths website and scroll down to video number 240, there's a dedicated video tutorial there on reverse percentages. But again, I really hope you found this video useful. If you have found it useful, please like and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.